everybody. This is Rob Curver from SmartCom Summit, and I'm here today with Dawn-Marie Elder, CPO. Dawn-Marie and I met a couple of weeks ago in London when it was not as cold as it is today, and at an event that was all about Microsoft Teams ecosystem and the phenomenal growth, I would say, of Microsoft as a UCaaS player. The latest figures from the Gartner Major Quadrant came out, all that stuff. So, Dawn-Marie, you've been in this industry for a little while. Can you talk a little bit about that and reflect on what you think of Microsoft's position these days? Is that something you saw coming?
I don't think I saw it coming back in the mid 2000s when they entered the cloud space, but it doesn't surprise me at all because it makes sense that if you are doing file share and collaboration and instant messaging and all the other things that Teams does, you would naturally bring the voice into that so that end users can really modernize their work experience and have one-stop shopping for everything that they need to do their daily work and be productive.
Yeah, because that is kind of a game changer, I think, right? The pandemic changed the way that we work online and we're communicating online in a different way. A lot of us work, live, and breathe in a collaboration platform, hours a day. So that's a
Right.
big change.
I think it made people give up some of their old habits and look for new ways of working to work more efficiently. If the pandemic hadn't happened, it probably just would have continued on a steady course, but not have the spikes that it has.
Right. So with this change happening in the industry, what do you think is the biggest opportunity for, let's say, the existing players or new players? What about carriers and mobile operators that are getting into this game or have been into the game and everything's changing around them? What's your view on that?
Yeah, so carriers have always had the basis of the relationship by providing the dial tone, either to a house, a business, your cell phone, etc. And now they have an opportunity to bring that into next generation of telephony services. And maybe someday we'll retire the word telephony or UCaaS and come up with some others. But I think there that in order to move down this path, if you are a traditional provider, you're going to have to think about things that maybe you didn't think about in the past, such as the user experience, how you're doing that engagement in a new way, so that you are really fulfilling the needs of the customer and you're hearing from the customer directly as opposed through just a big service provider contract where your end users are just a piece of that corporate contract.
Can you say a little more? Because your keynote at the event was also about the customer journey or the customer experience. And it was one of the few sessions I remember during that day that was not talking about technology or platforms or standards or interfaces or APIs so much, but more about the customer. And it seems that where this is going with, let's say, direct routing turning into operator connect, and I mean the need to differentiate in different ways is so crucial now, and it seems that putting the customer first, well, certainly a differentiation for a lot of providers.
Yeah. So I like to talk a lot about how are you going to attract or retain that customer that you have and show them that you can help them on their journey to modernize their experience, gain more value out of their Microsoft Teams entitlement that they have, and really prepare them for things that are going to be coming in the future. Talk and listen is interesting because we want to talk and listen to each other, but talk and listen now has the ability to be a pretty phenomenal data asset and provide additional value to an individual, a team, or to an organization as a business. So I think that the service providers really need to think about how are they going to change the conversation and it be less about feature and functionality and more about that customer, what the customer is looking for to do to evolve their own business and meet the needs of a pretty competitive workforce these days by providing people with productivity tools and insights into, you know, what they're doing every day in their meetings and in their phone calls and in their chats.
Right. So then quickly you talk about digital transformation and the changing workplace. So that's a bit of a challenge, I would say, for traditional telcos or mobile operators. They're not really all, not all of them, let's say, are used to having those conversations with their customers. So how do you help them with that?
So one of the things that we like to do is always start with the customer first, rather than pitching anything about you. You know, nobody would go on a date with a PowerPoint and talk all about themselves. So it's really understanding the customer's goals and objectives, their business outcomes that they're trying to drive, and working backwards from there, and aligning your messaging and aligning your value prop with what they're looking for, because then you're just tweaking that conversation, or you're tweaking that message to make it about the customer on the other side. And you probably, as a service provider, are learning a lot along the way about what some of the business use cases are, what the end user, use cases are, and understanding your customer a lot better to build, that knowledge base and build that expertise to talk to the next customer and the next customer and the next customer. Because as I said earlier, it's not about you're just signing up a contract where all these DIDs and numbers are on it anymore. You have to meet the needs of the business professionals that are using this collaboration tool each and every day to interact with their teams or their customers.
Right. So now thinking about where Microsoft is going, right? First we had direct routing, now it's Operator Connect, and the next thing on the horizon is Teams Phone Mobile, which
Mhm.
I think is really exciting because it's a way to get to the mobile users that are not necessarily in a web browser all day long. I guess that's the other 70% of the workforce globally, right? That's more mobile centric. But looking at zooming in on Operator Connect a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, there are 43 um, telcos or carriers live in Operator Connect right now, and there's a few dozen or a few hundreds in the pipeline, and they're being helped or accelerated by OC acceleration partners such as yourselves. There's just a handful of them. How is that going to work in the next year, basically? What are your expectation? Are we going to have an OC marketplace with 200 providers all looking exactly the same?
So both Microsoft and Zoom have provided the opportunity for anybody that's a carrier or service provider or operator, depending on what term or definition you use for that segment of the business, to come in. And there's a pretty big guideline around the mechanics and the architecture and the technical bits and bytes. Some operators are equipped to handle all that, and some, have made significant dollar investments into it. Some aren't, and some are in wait and see mode, and some of them may not want to change some of the things that they're doing today. So, an Accelerate partner can certainly help on the building of the infrastructure. SIPPIO created ours 4.5 years ago almost. And it just works. It's been the basis of our retail business for a long time, and because we're an aggregator of carrier services, we're funneling many carriers through our platform each and every day. But the other pieces of it that I think are equally, if not more important to match the customer journey that we're talking about here today, are the automation. If you look at those 43 providers, most of them don't have any ability to engage and transact with their customer. Their customer comes looking for them through that Microsoft admin page, which
Mhm.
really means that they don't know that customers are necessarily interested, and they don't know how to capture, retain, or move that customer, forward with them. So automation and landing pages, and those landing pages being differentiated and allowing the customers to transact directly from that landing page are going to be really important. If you think about Netflix, if you'd had to build, an infrastructure in your house, and you couldn't order Netflix online, we'd probably all still be at Blockbuster getting our videos as opposed to attempting to do it that way. So I see a lot of that is the same. And then the other piece, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a couple of minutes here, is the go to market, and how do you message this to your customers, and how do you find and recruit those customers and educate them, because the education, I think, is so important in being a trusted advisor to your end customer base.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that as well, because one of the comments also at the event was that, so Microsoft talks about 12 million PSTN phone numbers, right
Mhm.
now, or a couple of months ago.
Yep.
But there's a lot of those are, let's say, really large enterprises, right? So I think they mentioned dozens of 100K plus enterprise customers. And I think if once you go down a little bit to the mid market and the SME market, the requirements and the changes and the complexity of the organization changes. And that's exactly where the OC program is sort of meant to work, but also I guess the direct routing is important in certain circumstances. So I'm not sure if that's going to be a hybrid solution.
I've
Anyway,
seen
it's
I
pretty complicated. So how do you help the carriers to define that solution and to bring it to market?
Mhm. Yeah, so again, the automation is really key because a mid-market customer is probably looking for that instant sign up and gratification and get, talk, and listen, just operating, as opposed to an enterprise customer may have some additional considerations, uh, and complexities in their environment for analog, legacy, et cetera. But as a provider that's entering the market, you really have to make sure that the packages and the solutions that you're offering, again, go back to meeting the customer's need and the value that they're trying to get out of the solution. So there's things that you need to know about bundling and how are you creating that SKU. What's the right price point? Because a price point in a 100,000 customer may look very different from what an SMB customer or an education customer is able or willing to spend on similar technology. We have a whole database and set of analytics that we utilize with our carrier partners to help them with that. And we really make sure that they're not just building it, but they actually have a good value proposition and they have a good go to market strategy as to how they're going to be communicating with their customers and making the marketplace known or aware of what they're bringing, what their differentiators are. Because if a tree falls in the woods, doesn't make a sound if nobody's around to hear it. Same thing here. Just because you're in the Microsoft Admin Center doesn't really mean that your customers can do anything with the solution that you've put out there.
Right. So from a practical point of view, if I'm a carrier or I'm a mobile operator or I'm a UCaaS provider that doesn't really have a Teams enablement function yet, in working with you guys, what does it look like? What sort of time frame are we looking at to build a proposition, to develop the go-to-market materials, and to be actively, let's say, selling?
Mhm. So it depends on the carrier and how much of an investment they're willing to make. Usually, the best ones that can move the quickest have an executive sponsor. They have a commitment to this. They understand their customer base and the attributes of their customers. They've already thought through how are they going to win the hearts and mind of their sales team, because that's so important. Your sales teams have to be bought into any new solution that you're bringing to market. The architecture pieces and the automation pieces are relatively easy. We're talking about a couple of days of connection and testing and maybe doing some customization to mimic the look and feel of your brand through those landing pages. But then it's really thinking through those SKUs and those offers, the attributes of your customer, aligning that to a realistic timeline of how many customers do you think that you can attract and convert onto your solution. I'm seeing most of these carriers are taking 2, 3 months to think through that, which is fine because they maybe want to do that right and get it right the first time. But if you're a carrier where you're sitting on it for 6, 9, 12 months, you may kind of miss the market, or you might miss that first, leader advantage. And with the 43 that you mentioned, yes, there's another dozen behind that, but there's probably another 100 behind that. And then you have other players besides Microsoft, like Zoom, that are also attracting carriers into the marketplace for similar type of solutions. So you've got to get out there and make sure that you have that strategy and that it's orchestrated, and that you're focused on the right pieces. And I just see so much focus on what's under the hood rather than the
Mhm.
driving experience, and the driving experience is so important to the customer.
Yeah, I like what you said about, I mean, you mentioned Zoom, of course, and I think there's a bunch of other platforms that are opening up, already have opened up to this whole bring your own carrier. Everybody's looking at the carriers, right, as a
Right,
way to get to the certainly the mid market globally. Um, so I would think that's going to be a big change that's coming next, right? In a way, Microsoft has shown that it's possible to do this as a hyperscaler, to work with the carriers. I mean, it's not always easy, but it's certainly making progress.
right.
Zoom
It's
coming up.
funny to me that people think it's so new and innovative, because if you think about maybe I gotta get mine here, but if you think about your mobile device, right? I have an Apple, you might have an Android device. Those
No,
are
I
bring
haven't.
your own carrier. Oh, okay. But those are bring your own carrier for the most part, right? I mean, I could go to the T-Mobile store and buy an iPhone that's dedicated to
Yeah,
T-Mobile, but I can also go to the Apple store and buy one that will work with Verizon or whomever it is that I want. And then I have the ability, if I'm traveling, to stop at Orange in London and get a SIM chip and, use something different while I'm traveling. So
yeah.
it's not a new concept to the consumer market. We do it every day, but sometimes it's funny how, when we bring things into a business, they're now complicated just because it involves a business as opposed to an individual that's used to something.
Yeah, I like that analogy. So if you think about, let's say, B2B communication, cloud communication category, I mean, the iPhone or the smartphone was a game changer for mobile phones, right?
Right,
Because you could have all these apps, you could install whatever you wanted and choose the way you want to communicate. If you translate that, if you try and translate that to the B2B communi- collaboration space, you're sort of looking for a middleware platform where the different flavors of collaboration and other apps, if you will, so can be added to, and while at the same time it creates the interface, it makes sure that it's interfaced to all the carriers and does all the technology stuff. Is
right.
that is that where you see CPO heading, perhaps over time, as more and more of these flavors and value adds emerge, and the carriers don't want to and are not fast enough to integrate everything themselves?
Yeah, so I see a couple of things. One, I think there's a lot of players coming to market. So I would expect some type of consolidation. And then I think with the consumer perspective being in the back of your mind when you're in your workday, end users will expect things like Siri, Alexa, Hey Google, Bixby in their day to day. And I think voice and the ability to make and take calls is just kind of table stakes. And it's going to be less about hunt groups and auto attendant and call queues in the future. And it's going to be more about value add that tools such as AI can do. Because if
Right.
you think about voice, that's a data asset now. If you're recording that call or recording this meeting, if we have the right tool set attached to it, I could get a summary afterwards of how many times I said, how many times maybe I blinked, how many times I wasn't enthusiastic. And then also, it can be listening for keywords around um, things that we may have agreed to in terms of a next meeting or a deliverable, and then it sends me the summary and you the meeting request. And now I'm that much more productive because we don't have to have 5 emails going back and forth scheduling the next thing that we're doing. And I think the sentiment and the temperament, the tone and tenor of these meetings can really be evaluated as well. And that's not just important for call center employees. It's also important for just natural people engaging and interacting, because 2D and 3D are a little bit different. So how does AI help that 2D experience that you can really engage with and interact with somebody on the other side of the phone call or the other side of the video screen in the same way that you might in person?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned AI. I mean, also about 2 weeks ago, we saw the launch of Chat GPT as the next level or a next example of a tool that generates text basically from directives, which is really amazing. I've used it to write a couple of blogs myself. And it's certainly not perfect, right? And there's all sorts of caveats there, but the fact that this sort of technology exists now and is so readily available and it's coming to the workplace, and we're seeing it also with voice and with video. I mean, tool like Descript is just amazing. It's mind-blowing. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's really cool at applying AI things to video. So if you look at the future of what we used to call UCaaS or PBX before that, where do you think we're going to be in 2, 3 years from now?
I think it's just collaboration. I mean, UCAS and CPAS and omni-channel and all those are cool kind of words, but I think they're a little bit dated. Now it's just about, I want to talk and collaborate and interact and engage with you, but I also want insights into that engagement so that I can learn and be better. My team can learn and be better. My organization can learn and be better, because there's just so much that's happening here conversationally that if we're captured it, we're probably able to leverage that as an asset and do things that we haven't even thought of, for the future to better our business, uh, our business processes, outcomes, and serve the customer base better.
Well, I think that's our call. We're at the end of the 20 minutes slot that we had. It's been great talking to you, Domri. I look forward to what's coming next, and I certainly look forward to meeting with you again in London or some other place to continue this conversation.
Yeah,
Any
great seeing you, and I love the article that you just pushed out. So I would encourage anybody that's listening to this to go read what Rob wrote about the takeaways from Convel Enable. I think it's a pretty good perspective on what's coming in the future and who the players were. So we were honored to be mentioned in that as well as be here today. And I always love talking with you.
Oh, great. Likewise. I look forward to talking next time. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, Rob.
Take care.